May everything in creation become a catalyst for your self-understanding. Let the sacred whispers carried on the wind invite you to release what is not necessary. Let the breezes help your wings to ascend, the sparrows to remember your flock. Let the divine fire that burns in your heart kindle you to deeper compassion, sunlight to seek illumination. Let the rivers and seas support you in allowing spirit to flow through your life in new ways, embracing the rise and fall within you. Let the pine cones contain an epiphany. The forest ask you to embrace your truth once again, and each smooth stone a revelation. Let the moon sing of quiet miracles, like those which reveal and conceal the world every day right before your eyes. May you make time to listen to the elements and their wisdom, revealing the Holy One's face in the sacred direction for your one precious life.
So this morning, we looked at some theoretical things about a healing theology, and now I want to tell stories from Spring Forest to give examples of how we're attempting to live this way in our daily lives. And what I want to ask you to listen for, well, whatever the Holy Spirit wants you to pay attention to, of course, but to listen for how do you translate this across to any kind of neighborhood, any kind of context, because these principles do translate to any context. So that'll be part of what you're going to discuss after this talk. So what we're working on at Spring Forest is to cultivate a community of wounded healers. Henry Nouwen talked about being a wounded healer in his classic book of the same name, Wounded Healer. And in it, he said that if we don't attend to our own wounds and work on healing, we'll become wounded wounders. And most of the time, we won't even be aware of what we're doing. It'll just happen. So this intentionality and making it part of our spiritual practice to attend to our unfinished business, this is really important. And none of us is ever finished with it. It's an ongoing journey, right? So what is a community of wounded healers? Here's kind of a bullet point. So what is a wounded healer? What's a community of wounded healers? So I believe that this passage from Philippians chapter 2 is the premier text that the church needs to live into. And we've never successfully lived into this for any extended period of time. We've had moments. By we, I mean the whole history of the church. So Philippians 2, 5 through 11, you'll remember that passage. Let this same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who though he was equal with God, did not consider equality something to be grasped, but emptied himself. And then it goes on and it says how he emptied himself for us. And then out of this practice of emptying himself, this is what gives him the spiritual authority for us to actually worship him. And that the Greek word for emptying himself is kenosis. This fundamental posture of love, to give ourselves to the beloved, to give ourselves away. So what would it look like if in the church, if we imagined our communities as kenotic communities, that we're here to give ourselves away? We're here to love our neighbors with no strings attached. We're here to love whether people love us back or not. We're here to be the face of this Christ who's kenotic, whether we can get people to join our church and put money in the plate or not. It's not about that. It's not about that. It's about being faithful to being in the image of God who is love. So that's the first part. And in light of many ways we've gone off track with this, everything from colonizing and committing cultural genocide with indigenous people, to, in the church, in church speak, if you're in administration in church, referring to people as giving units, right? As if people were cows or something. I mean, even a humane treatment of a cow, you don't just see it as a giving unit, right? So there are so many ways for us to think about this and shift our orientation. Another practice of communities of wounded healers is to be deeply inclusive of people. Everybody has a place at the table. Deeply inclusive. And so this kind of church is going to heal all the isms and phobias that were in large part caused by the church, of excluding whole groups of people because they're of a different ethnicity, they have a different religious background, they are queer, they're women, whatever these ways are that we've acted out of excluding people, creating exclusive communities. Now we're going to shift and extend God's welcome to people, be a welcoming community. These communities of wounded healers are green. As the old hymn says, this is my Father's world. If this is my Father's world, if this is my God, my Father and Mother's world, if this is the world that God created and said it's good, and the whole thing we looked at this morning, then we're going to treat it that way. And we will understand that part of being a disciple is healing the wounds to the earth. That's part of being a disciple. We're going to have to redefine what we think about discipleship. I know in the churches that I've served, and in so many conversations I've had over the last 35 years, discipleship meant you go to church on Sunday morning most of the time. You go to church during the week at some point to be on a committee, to go to choir practice, to do something. You put money in the plate. You agree to a set of doctrines. You've joined the church, and now you're a disciple. And that definition of discipleship was very church building centered. It was Sunday morning worship centered. And it had very little to do with addressing systemic injustice in our society, care for the earth, taking seriously all these other things. It was very limited in scope. So our definition of disciple is going to have to change. And I remember something that Oswald Chambers said. Did you ever see My Utmost for His Highest, that devotional book? It's a classic, My Utmost for His Highest. In that book, he says, a disciple is someone who bears a strong family likeness to Jesus Christ. So it's about a family likeness. That's how we show up in the world. Did you know that you can have people in a community, and all of those people bear a strong family likeness to Jesus, and yet at the same time they have different theological perspectives on all sorts of things? Did you know you could do that if you have a practice-based community where it's first and foremost about practice rather than ideas and abstract things? You can do it. That's what happens at Spring Forest. We have that kind of community, practice-based. Communities of wounded healers are local. They have their hands in the local soil, whatever the soil is. They have their hearts living intentionally in the local neighborhood, part of the neighborhood, finding God in the neighborhood. It's very local. Remember what Margaret Wheatley said. These are decolonizing communities. So instead of taking away cultures and saying that your culture has to be like my culture, I'm the dominant person here, and so you have to talk like I do, dress like I do, like my kind of songs, you have to kind of do everything my way or our way, and then you can be an insider. Instead of that, we're the guests and our neighbors are the hosts. So we get to appreciate the cultures in which we find ourselves. And in today's cities, you can have many, many cultures just in one neighborhood. So this means we have to do our cultural work within our context, appreciating and finding God in those cultures in every way we possibly can. And then these communities of wounded healers are ecumenical. We have decided to give up competing as if we were a corporation and we're looking for customers, and there are only a limited number of customers, and so we've got to compete with those Lutherans down the road, or the Baptists, or somebody, or, whatever the communities are. But we're ecumenical, and we find all kinds of ways to network and work together in order to serve our neighborhood. So we lay down this ingrained American way of competition, and we take up the way of networking and support. I know that's pretty radical, but it can be done. We can collaborate. And then we practice evangelism through fascination, through bearing witness to God's love, rather than harvesting people as if they were salmon going up the ladder or a field of wheat, and we're going to cut them down and put them in our barn now. Fascination. Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove and William Barber, do you know those names? Do you know William Barber? They're calling him the modern Martin Luther King. William Barber, you really have to get to know what he's doing, because he's amazing, and he's from North Carolina, not far from where I live. And so they said this, they said, it's time for evangelism through fascination rather than force. You've got to give up all that forcing and manipulating and shaming and guilting and all that kind of stuff. So we practice evangelism not by trying to sell Jesus or win souls or any of that stuff, not to get members, but we practice a way of life that is so beautiful and fragrant and healthy and welcoming that people are curious. People want to be a part of the community, and we already treat them like they're a part of our community, because they are. We're the community of human beings. And God is in this movement of inclusion and welcome. Those are some kids and their moms at our Wednesday morning program called Grow It. So we have this program I mentioned before where we've got about 25 to 30 people in it now. It keeps growing. It's called Grow It. So it's a young family wellness program. It's multicultural, it's interfaith, and we have people on our lead team who are Muslim. We have some spiritual but not religious people, and we've got some devout Christians on the lead team. And so the children and their moms, and sometimes the dads come, and they have a farming experience. They feed the chickens, they pet the goats, they go to the hoop house, they harvest some veggies. We have one of our farm people with them so they don't pull up all the beets when they're not supposed to. And they've got little baskets, and these are little kids. And then they come back, and we have an outdoor kitchen that we built with a grant that we got for this. And we have tables set up around. We have a professional chef who's a dietitian. And so the chef, with some of the moms and a few of the kids, it changes up which moms and kids from week to week, prepare a really delicious meal that's healthy, that takes into account things like we don't ever serve pork, for example. We always have a vegetarian option for the people that don't eat meat, and we take care of that kind of care. The children have these little knives like you use in Montessori school, so it's safe, but there they are with these butcher knife-looking things, chopping their vegetables. Then the kids are excited to eat what they prepared. They're excited to drink a kale shake. Can you believe it? So they're growing up thinking kale is a good idea. And meanwhile, the moms are getting, the refugee moms are so isolated when they can't drive and they're in their house. They're the last ones usually to learn English. And so the moms are spending time together. We have translators so that we can all communicate. And there's a lot of laughter. We go pet the goats. We do a forest walk. We learn about the mushrooms and the frogs and all those things. And we have a yoga circle. With each child, whatever their first letter of their first name is, we do a pose that, like an animal or some activity. So everybody feels welcome and included. And that's one of the ways we seek to live out this theology that I'm talking about. It looks like that when it's being enacted. Okay, that's the right slide. You're doing well. All righty. Okay. So we are a new monastic community. One of the things we're doing at Spring Forest is pioneering what a monastic community would look like for Methodists, that draws from our own Wesleyan heritage, that draws from the long history of monasticism in different traditions, and that just looks different. So there are 3 families that anchor our community on the property. It's 23 acres with the 2 properties. And then that's our residential community. And then we have a dispersed community with several dozen more people that live in the area or far away. And we have digital things that we do. So we have morning and evening prayer on Zoom. And we have people from California to England that take part in that. And then we have monthly gatherings, so people who live a little further away, 2 hours away, can come for the things. Because this model of ministry is so different, there are people that live further away that are willing to drive for 2 hours to come once a month to do something for an evening. So it's like that. We don't have a worship service on Sundays. We don't do anything on Sundays except take care of the critters who have to be fed and watered, and we relax. We practice Sabbath. What that does is it makes it possible for some of the people who like to come and volunteer at Spring Forest, who also attend some church on Sunday once in a while. They're not that involved, but they're there once in a while. It enables them to come and be a part of our community. They can help people learn to speak English. They can grow food. They can subscribe to our CSA. They can be involved with Grow It. They can do these things, but they don't have to come to a worship service on Sunday. So we're not competing with their churches. We intentionally befriend the clergy and the church leaders from all these churches there are a whole bunch of churches now that are participating in doing, because they see us as a resource for their ministry because we're not competing. We're not taking anybody away. And so our impact is growing beyond, it's ridiculous. Numbers of people we are the primary faith community is really quite small. So here's some of our people. The top picture, we had a Taizé in the forest worship gathering with traditional Taizé music from the Taizé community in France. And it was amazing. It was so beautiful. The sun was going down and then the stars came out as we were worshiping and singing these songs. The women in the right-hand picture, 2 of them are on our farm team, and one of them is guiding the children's ministries that are emerging at Spring Forest. They are Lutheran, Anglican, and Catholic, those 3 women, and they're a part of Spring Forest. Then there's some of the many children that are part of Spring Forest, and there are the goats. I was herding the goats and took a picture. You know how people have pictures of their grandchildren? And I have a lot of goat pictures, and it's just kind of embarrassing. So we're ecumenical. We're also green. We practice regenerative farming. Do you know what that is? Regenerative farming? It's a natural farming method that sequesters carbon in the soil. Instead of it reduces the carbon load, which is amazing. And so we practice regenerative farming that heals the land, that brings it to maximum health. You do that through crop rotation, through rotational grazing of your livestock, through using natural fertilizers, making your own compost and all that kind of stuff, and using the no-till method that we're using now. I like the no-till method also because I'm a little OCD and I like all those straight rows of walking paths. It just makes me happy. So here we've got pictures from our CSA, our community-supported agriculture. So we grow vegetables and fruit, and we have chickens, we have eggs, and we sell subscriptions, so people come every week during the season and they get their box of veggies and eggs, and they pay for us up front, and then we use that money to pay our farm workers a living wage, and we also use that money to help pay for the cost of running our ESL program and the other refugee support things that we do. So we supply thousands of pounds of food to area food pantries every year, in addition to the CSA and growing food for our own community. And we have, it says 8 partner churches, but we have more than that now. Because we have some new partner churches that are just joining in now, so it'll be 12 this year that partner with us. And we have a coffee shop that partners with us as a distribution site. And Duke Divinity School now partners with us. It took a little while to get there, Robert, but we have Duke interns now. And last fall, the director of student services called me up and said, can we bring all our new students out to Spring Forest for a retreat, for you to lead a day retreat to introduce them to your ministry model? And I said, sure, I'll be glad to have them come out. So they did. So more and more people are coming from Duke to learn about what we're doing. So the farm is the biggest connector for us to our spiritual but not religious neighbors. There are lots of people in Orange County and beyond who care about the environment, who care about human rights. They care about the immigration injustice issues that are going on. And so that they want to be a part of what we're doing because they care about those things. And along the way, when they ask us, why are you doing these things? We can tell them because out of our sense of what God has called us to be in the world, that's why we're doing these things. And the conversations are so natural and easy. So that's our biggest connector. So the top right-hand picture is sweet potato harvest. The top left-hand picture is some of those CSA boxes. The bottom left-hand picture is more of the CSA boxes that are open. You can see all those delicious veggies. And then the bottom right is a picture of a couple of women who've had really severe trauma in their lives and are doing great now. They're doing great now. Takes a village, right? We have a program called Global Friends, and we've been able to get several grants to help us pay for these things, because after all, we're just a small community. And with Global Friends, we have ESL classes for refugees. We do hospitality and immersion events. So we have parties and picnics and birthday celebrations, baby showers, anytime we can have a party, we're all in. And we collaborate with other churches and with organizations. World Relief is our primary partner for becoming in relationship with refugees. And we offer now temporary housing at the farm for refugees. Sometimes when families or individuals come, a house or an apartment isn't available for their particular situation. Right now we have an Iranian woman living with us at the farm while she waits for senior housing to be available for her in her situation. And again, it's ecumenical. There are people from other churches, other religions, and no religion that participate in this because it's practicing together. We don't make anybody sign a statement that they believe in Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, or they can't have a box. You know what I'm saying? We just don't do that. I don't see Jesus doing that. We have an educational program that has quite a reach online and in person. It's called Hope for Humanity. And these programs are like webinars and classes that they've been online quite a bit since COVID started, but they're coming back in person too. So focusing on indigenous and migrant justice and what forced migration does to people and why it happens and all those things. And that same group, which is led by a retired United Methodist deaconess, takes people on pilgrimage experiences to learn about justice at the border. They've done activism in Washington, D.C. She's gathered groups and taken them to remember when the people were being bused and dropped off in D.C., so she went and helped people to join in with what was happening there to provide support and resources for people. I told you about Grow It already. There's Shema in the front making a funny face. She's our translator for people, several Middle Eastern languages. She's from Afghanistan. And then there's Shanetta behind her, who's our chef and nutritionist. Shema's also a retired chef. And then there's just some kids having fun. More things are emerging now as we speak. We've had kids come, youth groups come to have a retreat day at the farm where we introduce them to our ministry model and to how these things work. And they've had special focal points. Last fall, when one of those groups went to Washington, D.C. to help the people that were being dropped off in these buses, Lisa, who leads this group, took a youth group from it was White Plains United Methodist Church, I think in Raleigh, and took these kids and their their pastor or the youth director and went. And so the kids had this experience. When the kids came, and these kids are all Latino, so they all spoke the language of the people being dropped off. So it was really an incredible experience for them to support their neighbors, right? And when they came back, they told their pastor they didn't want to do youth group activities anymore. They wanted to do this kind of stuff instead. So they came out to Spring Forest for a retreat to begin to organize around, okay, how can we make youth group about actually serving our neighbors instead of about pizza and whatever they used to do. So it was kind of amazing. So more things like that are happening. And then I mentioned to you yesterday about Kay Bella, the group that Francesca started. Francesca's the Catholic woman that started it. And it's for middle school girls that teaches them to encounter God through the portal of beauty. And so the girls are learning about the beauty of slow cooking and the beauty of Scottish dancing and the beauty of blowing glass. And Francesca's just a genius at connecting these pieces. So now more parents with other ages of kids are wanting more of this. So we're in the middle of writing a grant to the Lilly Endowment, and we're hoping and praying you can join us in our prayers. If we get this grant, then we could hire Francesca, whose profession is writing curriculum for schools that do the classic approach to education. She just has all the chops for this, right? We'd like to hire her to be our designer and leader and equiper of people to do these really creative things with kids. It looks very different from the children's ministry that we've had before, right? Very different. It's not Sunday school. There's no flannel graphs or veggie tales or any of those other things. And so that's happening. And then Tim, who lives next door on the farm with his wife and kids, is a naturalist. He has a degree in forestry and works for a nonprofit in the forestry industry. But he's an incredible naturalist, so he's starting a junior naturalist club. Tim regularly goes through and identifies all these birds and different types of frogs. We have so many birds I didn't realize we had. I just hear them and they're like, isn't that a nice bird, you know? Tim sees and hears everything. And so that's emerging, and we have families where the parents really want their kids involved with that because we believe that we encounter God through this created world. That's what this morning was partly about. And then finally, Shanetta, her dream when she went to get her registered dietitian training, now she'd been a chef for years, she wanted to get that training because she wanted to bring healthy food to kids who were in food deserts, healthy kid food and a knowledge of how to prepare food and grow food to kids who are in lower net worth families that are going to have trouble. They're going to have diabetes and things because their food they have access to sometimes is the gas station and places like this. So she's gone to all this effort. And so when she came to Spring Forest through a random connection through somebody else that was a djembe player, so we found out what her passion was. We said, well, we can help you reach your dreams. And she said, really? And we said, yeah, we can help you. Why don't you, let's do this grow it thing. And so we got started. And now she's connected to our local elementary school. It's just less than 10 minutes from the farm. And she's working with all the third graders every week. And it's hands-on nutrition education. The kids can't wait for that time every week. She brings in the equipment. They prepare food. She started a little aquaponics thing where they can learn to plant the seeds and so on. And it includes a program through the summer on the farm for the families to come to the farm. And she's in that grant that we're writing too, so we can expand what she's able to do. So that's emerging now too. Our lead team for Spring Forest is trauma-informed. What does that mean? That means they've read Bessel van der Kolk. They've read about that. They have done their work on understanding what it means to heal the wounds that have been caused by a toxic form of Christianity. They've done that work. So we work on cultural humility. We work on anti-racist understandings and practices. We are affirming of the queer community. We practice self-awareness and healing from our own wounds. We're working on that together. And we have regular leadership team meetings that are for spiritual formation and leadership formation that are not oriented toward goals and budgets and things. They're oriented toward actually our growth, right? So we regularly have those meetings. We share power on our team, so it's not You know what I'm talking about. And we're collaborative. So those are some things that we do as a lead team. That's Tim, by the way, and Gretchen with their kids, the bottom right corner. They live next door on the farm, in the farmhouse. The woman with the red hair is our current intern who will be finishing up with us soon, and we have 2 new interns joining us this summer. And then the person on the top left is a retired gym teacher. She volunteers with us. She's a member of another church and volunteers with us regularly, not only on the farm, but also in our ESL program, working with the kids. So here is some recommended reading for cultivating communities of wounded healers. This is just a tiny beginning of things to read. There's a lot out there that can help us. You can take a picture of that screen if you want to. Might be easier. I talked about some of these books yesterday. All right, so now the last slide. So these are questions to talk about in your groups. So what are some principles of how Spring Forest is cultivating communities of wounded healers that can translate into any social context? I'm trusting that you know I'm not telling you that you need to start a farm, although that would be awesome. I'm into farming. This is not about farming. This is about relationships. Somebody told me recently that came to Spring Forest for a tour, and we get lots of people coming to learn about what we're doing, and I got finished with taking him around, and he says, I think I figured this out. This is all a front for making a community. I said, you found me out here. Yeah. So in your ministry context, how might you and your congregation begin to move intentionally toward incarnating these principles? What might be the first steps? Those are your questions in your groups. And why don't you take about 15 minutes, and then any questions that your group want to bring we're going to come back together and have a time for question and comments. So anything from your group that you'd like to bring, we can talk about at that time. And I hope it will be a conversation back and forth.